Since the beginning of human civilization, there have been stories of deadly creatures of the night, monsters who come out only after the sun is down to prey on the innocent. But are those stories just stories, or are they more than that? Let's take a look at the biology of vampires and figure out if they could actually exist. First things first, we're sticking with the basics here. That means none of that weird stuff we've seen in modern vampires. No sparkles, no weird parasite things, just good old fashioned blood drinking bat people monster things. And in those old school myths, there are three main things that vampires always seem to share: they drink blood, they are killed or weakened by the sun, and they're immortal. Let's take a look at blood drinking first. Well, there actually are quite a few animals that drink blood. Vampire bats are probably one of the most well known. These animals prove that it is possible to survive off of a diet of blood alone. But there are some problems here. If you saw my video on chupacabras, then you might already know that blood isn't a great food source. Blood just isn't very nutrient dense. To make a long story short, for a human sized creature to survive on blood, it would take gallons of it a night. And the average human only has about 1.2 to 1.5 gallons of blood in them. This means that in order to survive, our human sized blood drinking monster would have to completely drain several victims every night. So if a town is supporting multiple vampires, the population would start declining pretty quickly. Now, one solution that we've seen to this could be something found in a video game. In Skyrim, the vampires have a few humans that they keep around just to feed on. And this sounds like a good idea, but the problem here is that humans don't produce blood that quickly. Now, plasma can regenerate pretty quickly, usually within a day or two. But the cells and other components of blood can take a little bit longer. That can vary from person to person, but it usually takes about 6 to 8 weeks to fully regenerate a pint of blood. That's why when you donate blood, you can't again for another 8 weeks. So even if one vampire was using humans as livestock for blood, they would need hundreds. The amount of food and resources needed to keep those hundreds of livestock alive would just be way too much. But there might be a more practical solution. This is where our theoretically possible vampire would diverge from the myths and legends. I don't think its diet would be only blood. What would be more likely for a creature of that size is that they maintain an omnivorous diet and just feed on blood to supplement some of the things that their bodies can't produce on their own. There are a lot of components to blood, various types of cells, plasma, and other proteins. There's also nutrients that the blood carries throughout the body. So, if an animal wasn't able to produce some of these things on their own, it might be beneficial to them to supplement their diet with blood that does contain these things. If this were the case, our vampire wouldn't need to necessarily drain multiple victims every single night. They would just need to maybe take a little bit of a drink every now and then to help their body replenish some of these things that they can't produce on their own. So, diet wise, our vampire doesn't drink blood exclusively, but it does drink blood occasionally. But I think a bigger problem here is the sun. Before we move on to that next section, though, make sure you like and subscribe. It really helps out small creators like myself. Thank you. Now, depending on what source you're looking at, vampires have very different reactions to being in the sun. In some cases, they immediately turn to dust, and in some cases, they just sparkle. But either way, there is some kind of sensitivity to sun here. So let's take a look at how some real world animals deal with sun sensitivity. There's actually a lot of examples of animals that are sensitive to the sun. One of the most well known examples is humans, actually. Now, our sensitivity to the sun isn't enough that we get turned into ash if we are touched by even a little bit of natural sunlight. But if you stay out in the sun for a while and don't put on any sunscreen, you might end up with a pretty nasty burn. And there are some other animals that have this same problem, and they can deal with it in a number of ways. Some animals have fur or feathers, so don't really need to worry about it, but some animals do have a lot of bare skin. Now, hippos can't just go to the store and buy sunscreen. They're too big. But they evolved a pretty cool solution. They actually sweat out a substance that acts as a natural sunscreen. Pigs have also found a creative solution. Pigs are well known to roll around in mud to help protect themselves from the sun. Now, if vampires had a sensitivity so mild that a little bit of sunscreen or mud would be able to save them, I don't think there would be myths about them burning up in the sun. Now, there are some plants and animals that are more sensitive to the sun, but everything we find in the natural world doesn't quite have as strong a reaction as you hear about in vampire myths. Even our cave dwelling friends aren't quite that bad off. Now, to be clear, if an animal evolved to live in darkness and lived in darkness its whole life, it could pretty easily die from sun exposure. But for the most volatile reactions, we need to take a look back to humans. Now, there are actually a few different conditions that we could call sun allergies, and there are even some medications that can cause increased sun sensitivity. But let's just jump right to the most extreme example: xeroderma pigmentosum. I hope I said that right. Xeroderma pigmentosum, also known as XP, is a really rare condition, about 1 in a million, that makes a person super susceptible to sun damage. Basically, what happens to people with this condition is their bodies don't have all of the normal natural responses to sun damage. Now, no matter what, when you go out into the sun, your skin gets a little bit damaged. UV rays are not that nice to cells and DNA, but for most people, that damage gets repaired pretty quickly. If you're out for too long, you might get sunburnt, but even that will heal after a few days. For people with XP, their body just doesn't do any of the things that it needs to do in order to protect and heal from the sun's harming rays. This means that they can burn a lot faster, the sun is more damaging to their skin, and that damage is permanent. Now, depending on the specific variation of XP that a person has, they might start to blister just from being in the sun for a few minutes. People with XP need to avoid direct sunlight at all costs. This means that they have to wear sun resistant clothing or just go out at night. Both very vampire things to do. So maybe stories of vampires were just people with this or similar conditions that made them susceptible to sun damage. Stories like that tend to get exaggerated as they're told and retold, so no doubt over time, the stories of a weird kid that avoided direct sunlight turn into stories of someone who will explode into ash if they're even touched by the rays of the sun. So, sun sensitivity is very possible, but probably over exaggerated in the myths. Now, the last main vampire trait that we need to talk about today is their unnaturally long lives. Now, before we get into that, let's talk about immortal versus invincible, because I've seen a few places online where people have argued about these terms specifically. So, for the sake of this discussion, immortal means that someone or something just doesn't age. They can still be harmed or killed, in the case of vampires, usually by silver weapons or wooden stakes to the heart, but they won't age naturally and won't ever die of old age. Invincible, on the other hand, just means that the individual cannot be harmed or killed at all. So when we're talking about vampires, we're talking about immortal creatures, not invincible. Okay, now that we've got that cleared up, the question remains: is immortality possible? Well, there are a few examples of this in the natural world. The most well known one is probably lobsters. Lobsters are what we call biologically immortal. Basically, their cells don't age, so they theoretically could go on growing and aging forever. But how does this work? Well, every cell has its own set of chromosomes that contain all of their DNA. The problem is that every time a cell divides, the ends of these chromosomes, called telomeres, get a little bit shorter. Eventually, the telomeres run out, and the actual DNA itself starts to get damaged every time a cell divides. Damaged DNA can lead to a number of issues that can lead to a cell's death. This means that each cell really can only divide so many times. So, how do lobsters get around this? Well, they produce a special enzyme that can fix those telomeres so cells can continue dividing indefinitely. So, the lobster's individual cells don't really have to deal with the ravages of time, but that doesn't mean that the individual as a whole can live forever. You see, the problem with lobsters is that they don't stop growing, and they have to molt from time to time. If a lobster can survive for long enough, they will eventually get too big, and their molting process becomes incredibly difficult. Lobsters that end up living for too long and getting too big will ultimately end up dying from exhaustion or starvation due to a molting process that they just can't handle. So, even though a lobster can theoretically live forever, they can't really live forever. The oldest one that we've ever found was estimated to be about 140 years old. But are there other animals that can actually live forever? Well, maybe. There's a genus of animals called Hydra that, as far as we can tell, can actually live forever. Well, as long as there's enough food and they don't become food themselves. Hydra are microscopic freshwater animals that maintain their own stock of stem cells. So if any cells get too old or sick or damaged, they can just replace them. And the really important thing about stem cells is that, like lobsters, they can repair their own telomeres. So, due to this constant supply of stem cells, hydras can replace any cells that they need to. Another important benefit to this is that they can also regenerate lost limbs. In fact, if you cut a hydra in half, you end up with two hydras. So, immortality is possible, but we haven't really seen it in anything bigger than a lobster, and lobsters aren't really immortal. So, is it reasonable to think that something that the size of a human could be immortal? Well, yeah, I think so. If it were possible for a human sized creature to produce enough of the telomere repairing enzyme telomerase, then theoretically they would be able to deliver it to every cell in their body and keep all of their cells young and healthy. So, yeah, I think there could be a human sized creature that's immortal. It seems like it was never really an evolutionarily advantageous trait, but it does seem like something that could be possible under the right circumstances. Okay, so we know that there is a biological precedent for all of the main traits of vampires, but is a vampire actually possible? Well, yeah, I think so. Maybe not in the traditional sense where they're undead and have to bite people to make more vampires, but a blood drinking humanoid creature who's sensitive to the sun and lives for a really, really long time, yeah, I think something like that could exist. So I think our scientifically accurate vampire would drink blood, but that wouldn't be their only food source. It would just drink blood as a nutritional supplement. They could have a sun sensitivity due to a genetic condition that every individual of the population has, and they could be very long lived or potentially immortal because their bodies can produce enough telomerase. If they looked enough like humans and were as smart as humans, they could live in human settlements virtually undetected. If they're more animalistic in their nature or appearance, they would probably have to live in caves or the forest. But yeah, I think either way, that's probably a pretty possible animal. So yeah, I think vampires could exist. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. Please make sure you like and subscribe. That really helps smaller channels like me out. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And remember to stay curious.